learn Figma fast, I mean real fast, you want to jump in and just hit the ground running, well, this is the course for you. I take you through a project from start to finish in right around 20 minutes. So pretty quick. There's lots of things to learn. You can obviously take this, build upon it, but for someone who's just getting started, I think this is the course for you. So initially you want to try to figure out, what like design out there do I want to copy essentially. Now, we're not going to call this our own work. It's a study. We're essentially looking at what other people have done and trying to learn Figma by doing our best to kind of decode what it is that they've done. And it's nice because then you're not just, there's a little bit of that with regard to the selection of which piece you're going to do, but you jump in there and this is what's in front of you and you've got to do your best to, emulate it. And so you're not playing to your own strengths or weaknesses necessarily. Like if you were just to jump into Figma and create your own UI design without any kind of direction or brief. So this way, all that work's been done for you. You know what's there, and now it's just about taking it, turning it into something in Figma that's workable, essentially. And I kind of like this piece here because there's some good elements, some transparencies, some photography, little buttons and switches and graphics, and it's a simple enough layout, so I think this is a good one to go ahead and grab a screenshot of and then open up Figma. So initially you're just going to open a design file and your canvas obviously is going to be blank, and just paste that in there, Command V on a Mac, and then there's different ways you could do this. You could work right over top of it, or put it to the side and just kind of work from the side. But we're going to work over top of it because let's say you were given this design at work, someone created it in Photoshop, but they need it built into something that can be used for UI, and this is what the developers like is our Figma files. So you would work right over top of that just to ensure that you're getting some pixel perfect stuff. So go ahead and select it, and you can right click and then select frame selection, and then now it adds a frame that's the exact same size as this image that we just pasted in here. You can see your assets are over there on the left, your layers. And then with the image selected, you can change the opacity of it over there on the right hand side. And initially what we're going to do is we're not going to worry too much about the colors or anything. It's just like, let's capture the layout first of all. There are different ways to do things, better ways to do things. But if I was just getting started in an application like Figma, this is the direction that I would want to learn, because you don't get all bogged down by the nitty gritty. I'm just drawing rectangles around these different shapes and then changing the radius of the corners to match what we're seeing in this design. And to create a rectangle, just hit R and start dragging. So, and then we've got these little corner circle widget things that allow us to scale the radius of the corner. And every once in a while you'll notice things when you create something, it's not necessarily in your frame. So over there in the left hand side in your layer palette, go ahead and drag that underneath the frame. So this is just a lot of the same stuff. So I'm going to quickly get through the drawing of all of these different rounded rectangles, you know, nesting some of them for toggle switches and different things. You know, this little donut graph is a fun little challenge. You know, you draw an oval by hitting O, and then, you know, in this case I decided to use, you know, a stroke and approximate the width of this donut graph. And once I get it to where I want it, by adjusting the angle of the opening here, then I'll go ahead and go up to the top to point mode and delete that middle point so that we no longer have a join there. And depending on what you had your strokes set to, inside, outside, center, whatever, you're gonna have to scale it up or down to adjust it. Now I'm working on this little widget. I'm adding some of my first text. To add text, the shortcut there is just hit T and start typing. I'm duplicating the text to line it up and get everything in there for this little menu. And this is where I decided, you know, let's go ahead and give you a quick little introduction to an auto layout. And so even though these other list elements or menu elements don't have a border around it, I'm going to go ahead and add one and then group each of these individually so that, you know, they take up the same amount of space. With them selected, you can create an auto layout, and I believe you can just hit A to add an auto layout, or right click and say auto layout, and then you can see over there on the right hand side I can adjust where the auto layout happens. Is it top left, top middle, etc., and then I can adjust the spacing and it does that automatically. And then just for some good hygiene here, I'm going to go ahead and name each of these items and name them something that makes sense. And then what I want to do is group all of these things together. My auto layout and then the background rectangle, get them all into a group. And then I'll duplicate that background rectangle, change it to a solid color instead of just an outline, because this can be our mask. So hit use as mask, and everything in the group that's above that mask will be masked. So now you can see it cut off that fitness tab down there at the bottom. And now I've taken the image and I've adjusted the opacity to 100% so that I can start picking some colors for some of these elements. And obviously if you were doing this for real and there was an existing brand or you have a color palette you need to follow, you know, then you'd want to use the actual hexadecimal values and not just pick colors from an image. But in this case, it totally does the job. So just going element to element, adjusting the colors. Obviously on the little donut graph by the leaf there, that's a stroke as opposed to, you know, a fill. So you got to make sure to adjust that color. And then I want to head over to my menu, and I hid the outline shapes, the larger rectangles around hydration and fitness, you know, to be true to. And you'll notice that the font that I'm using isn't the exact font from this design, and that's just because this is just for practice. Now over here on the left, I'm adding the text, the labels, to I believe this is temperature of the room, kitchen, bedroom, etc. And I did those all in one text box. Then I'm adjusting the line height to give me the distance that I need. You know, you could have treated these as individual pieces and put them in an auto layout like we did the menu, but I'm just trying to show you there's multiple ways to skin a cat, which isn't the prettiest metaphor in the world. I'm just continuing to drop in, drag and drop text. So once you've got the text all put in there, you know, you can start working on some of these icons. I'm not going to do them all just because of, for the sake of time, and to show you that, you know, as a study, you don't need to do everything. You're just doing enough to where you feel like, hey, I've learned what I needed to learn about this Figma project. Now, if you're a designer in training, or you know, a junior designer and a senior design person has asked you to copy this mock-up as closely as possible, then yeah, go ahead and do everything. Find the correct font. You know, illustrate each icon, because they're going to be looking at your attention to detail. But if you're already a designer and maybe you're just new to Figma and you're trying to get a feel for what you can do in here versus some other apps, because maybe you've decided creating icons here in Figma is just too awkward for me, so I'm going to create them in Adobe Illustrator and then copy and paste them over here and reuse things whenever, and then that helps keep sizing consistent. So I duplicated this line from the plus icon above down to the pause button down here, and you can do that by just holding down Option and dragging to duplicate. I believe it's Option, if not try Command. That's what I get for narrating these how-tos after the fact. So now we've got this little triangle thing, and I'm zooming way in, and I can tell that one edge, one side is rounded, one is sharp. So what I do is hit R for rectangle, draw a rectangle. You know, I've copied and pasted the attributes from the stroke next to the little triangle shape, just so I don't have to key in all that stuff. But get a square. You might be like, that's not a triangle. Well, rotate it 45 degrees, and then, you know, in point mode, hit P for pen, hold down Option and hover over till you get that minus symbol and delete that point. Then just drag it out to be a roughly the triangle shape that you're looking for. And for this eco icon, I'm just gonna again right click, copy properties, right click, paste properties, and just kind of have a circle placeholder icon for balance purposes. And now at this point I've got my layout down, everything is essentially where I want it, so went ahead and pulled that image out of the frame, and this way I can focus on picking all of the colors and not having to hide things so that I can see what's going on underneath. Just going around and picking all those colors. I love Figma's color management. You know, once you've used a color, it automatically adds it in your swatches. It's just easy to grab that color for other elements and keep your colors consistent. Now, to add a gradient, it's pretty easy. You just, in that same color overlay window, just select the gradient icon up there, and then you can adjust the stops on the gradient and adjust the color values until you get something that you like. You can see there's some things I'm definitely missing. I don't have a photo of a woman yet, or the little Fitbit watch, the leaf, all of these different things. But right now we're just focusing on the UI itself. And then what I went ahead and did is jumped into AI, Mid-Journey, put in a prompt, got an image of a woman that isn't exactly like what I'm working with, but it has a similar fill, and it's going to fill that space nicely. And then inside of Photoshop, I'm just removing the background. Then I'll go in there, the mask, maybe fix up a couple areas. So no biggie, but copy that, get that on the clipboard, and then you can bring it on into Figma. And what I decided is, after looking back at the original UI, I decided it'd be nice to have the actual background in there so that I could keep that shadow, because you can tell that there's some different colorations, in the version that we're looking at. So yeah, I was kind of wondering why my image wasn't clipping the way it was supposed to by the frame, and so over there in the right hand side with the frame selected, I was able to enable clipping. And I don't want to scale it down yet because it looks like I had forgotten to paste in the clipped version of this woman. Make sure you don't have the image, your background image selected, and before you paste, because otherwise you'll replace it. So I've pasted it in, kind of eyeballed the location, moved it down in the layers to be just right above the background. And then I'm toggling the visibility of that layer just to get it, as perfectly lined up as possible. And with the image selected, you can use your arrow keys to move it around. And then I select both images over there in the left-hand image palette, and then just hold down Shift as I'm scaling it to keep everything, proportionally scaling the way you want them to. And now I'm just trying to decide, now obviously it's a different image than what's being used in the reference, so it's going to fit slightly different, but I still want it to be generally in the same spot, and her head to come up above that little module next to the eco module. So a fill-in like this is probably a good place, and now you can move elements behind that background image so that it gives it some 3D dimension, if you will. So now she's walking or standing amidst the different elements, and she's not just a flat image in there. So kind of nice. And I've decided to, maybe adjust the position of this woman a little bit. Do I want her in front of that eco image at all? Yeah, I don't know. You're looking for tangents, weird tangents where edges of the image line up weirdly with edges of the UI, and obviously we want to avoid that. Now this is something that I love. It's one of my favorite effects inside of Figma, and it's this layer, this background blur. So you can see I just selected an effect, toggled that, and then dragged the adjustments to get the blur level that I want, which I think adds a nice level of sophistication. And then I've decided to go ahead and add, subtle drop shadow to some of these UI elements just to give it even more dimension. And, the lighting's not exact, or some elements that maybe should have a shadow and others that don't, and whatever. But I decided to do this because I thought it would look cool, as well as it'll help me introduce you to styles. So we've got this shadow on the eco box, and what we can do is let's go back and select that layer that has the shadow on it. You can see the effects over there in the bottom right. Click on those 4 dots and then the plus icon, and then we're adding a new effect style. Just go ahead and name it whatever you think makes sense. Subtle, drop, shadow. Create the style, and now when I click on a new element, go to effects, that 4 icon, and then select the shadow. And now it's a global style, so we could go in and edit that style later, and it would change that effect throughout our entire document. So that's working smarter, right? So now back to Midjourney, and I created a quick Fitbit inspired watch, isolated on white, and then just copy that out of Photoshop after I removed the background. Paste that in here. Now I do love Midjourney for stock photography, essentially. Now it's not perfect, and it's going to give you some weird things, like, didn't notice this initially, but this watch has way too many holes in it, in places where it wouldn't really have holes, but that's okay. It does the job. And then with that image selected, there's a little bit of image editing you can do right here in Figma to get that to kind of pop, which is a term that designers get a little sick of sometimes. Now we've got this little thumbnail image that's still an outline. I'm just going to grab a color for it. I'm not going to worry about finding an image. You all know how to do that. I showed you how to create a mask earlier, so you could drop an image in there and mask it so that it works just like in the example over there on the left. At this point, we're getting pretty close. Back to Midjourney for a leaf, and this turned out pretty decent. So essentially, you could call that good. Some minor tweaks that could be done here and there, and I decided to depart from the example inspiration image a little bit, just to show you another thing with masking that I think is cool here in Figma. So this is kind of to do with gradients that aren't just simple linear or circular gradient. So I drew an oval shape. Right now it's just a weird gray color. I'm going to pick something that's closer, blue, and I'm going to use my color slider to find something that's not the same blue. Play with the scale a little bit, and you might think, okay, this looks dumb, whatever. But go to effects again, and this time we're going to use layer blur. Crank up that blur. 100 might be too much. Yeah, let's go to 50. And so now we've already got kind of a cool blur highlight going on there. And you can play with the layer blend mode here. Overlay color dodge is a nice one. That might be too strong, so I can always bring down the opacity of that layer. Duplicate that, And this is where it gets really powerful. You know, you can play with different blend mode. You could use a different color altogether. That was kind of nice. Luminosity, just leave it like that maybe. And this is something that using just gradients on a shape inside of Figma, this would not be possible. But by blending these shapes inside of a mask over top of a background color, you can get this kind of stuff. And bonus, these elements can be animated independently inside of, you know, your web development using, you know, SVG animations or whatever. So pretty powerful. So you could have like an undulating gradient thing going on back there. So this is up to you where things go. But essentially that, my friends, is the tutorial. You feel free to tweak till your heart's content, but I'm going to go ahead and call it.